This podcast talks candidly and openly about issues of male sexual violence. A full list of topics can be found in the episode description.
Hello, my name is George. I'm the host of Beyond the Silence, the official podcast of We Are Survivors. Thank you for joining us for our second part of our 16th anniversary special. If you haven't seen part 1, what are you doing here? Go and watch that right now. Part 2 will make very, very little sense to you unless you've done that. But if you've joined us from the first part, welcome back. And join us for our conclusion of the anniversary special, where we discuss the year of consent and everything we have in store.
I do want to talk about what we currently offer. Let's get a quick snapshot of where we are in this exact moment before we stop dangling the proverbial carrot and talk about this year of consent. So I'd like to first, before I get a sort of a look at maybe the role of OUTSpoken, life on the ground in the ISVA team, and what it's like being a therapist here at the moment and also in the community. I want to focus first and foremost on ONIT, because we're talking about the brand, we're talking about how it appears, how it reaches people. It's a lot is worth saying about how much it's been able to change, how much it's grown. I think it's something to say about the organization. And of course, I'm about to talk about OUTSpoken, which very much has wings of its own. But the fact that it has an identity that is disconnected, yet so thoroughly part of what we do.
So I will very briefly say about this, because there's 3 people sat to my left who know way more about it. But it's kind of like, I suppose ONIT's got its origins in the work that Gaynor and I were doing.
It's the thread I'm seeing, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, we didn't talk about chemsex that much, although I've just had this flash.
That you had, and we had to find a bed somewhere because they didn't know how to treat.
Yeah. So before anybody started talking about chemsex, that's why it's not been in my mind. You're right. I had a client who was GHB dependent.
Yes.
And there was no protocol in the UK for doing a detox. And you're right. Yeah. We were on the phone to Amsterdam, asking these professors in Amsterdam how to do it. And then also, do you remember that situation where we had to raise the alarm?
Because there was a meth factory in the back alley behind us.
Somebody was cooking meth in the back alley. And we ended up, it was all over the news and everything. The bomb squad had to come in.
I think you phoned the police because somebody had just come in and said, I've just heard.
That's right.
That there's someone cooking up meth.
Yeah.
And we was like, right, so what have the police said? Oh, I've not phoned the police.
Yeah.
Well, I would suggest we phone the fire brigade to start.
Yeah. That's true. And so, I think it was like on the radar, but we used to do this thing at Lifeline called Safer Dancing. And it was all about how to support people and talk to people about, look, if you're going to go out to a nightclub and do whatever, take drugs, how can we do it? How can we help you do it safer as possible? Yeah. That's the core of what the drug strategy was at that time. And so when it kind of became more and more and more prevalent, I literally lent into Michael because Michael's academic work, and we were having many conversations, weren't we, about just what we were seeing in our own community.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't even necessarily so much about the academic side of my work. It was like, as a drag queen, you would go out, be part of people's night out, see people on the dance floor, and then sometimes just people would stop coming to the dance floor. And then you would find out a few months later that the reason why they stopped coming to the dance floor was because they were dead. And there was and there still is a big party scene in Manchester, this kind of like layer that we don't always see of parties that are happening all the time, chemsex parties. And I don't mean in any way to kind of be over the top in saying that, they're not all involving people who are dying all the time.
Sure.
But in terms of that, the way that death was often dealt with and not spoken about, or spoken in hushed tones, or attributed to, they must have not known what they were doing. There was this need that I felt to start talking about that.
Of course.
And it may seem like a strange thing to connect into an organisation that we are survivors, but of course the thread that runs through all of that is shame.
Yeah.
And certainly in relationship to an experience of sexual abuse or rape, there can be a huge amount of shame. And in the same way, so ONIT was also working with George House Trust around HIV. HIV is something where shame can often come into the conversation. And shame can drive people in all kinds of strange, horrible and scary directions, including maybe losing oneself in drugs or violence or any number of things. And so for me, that was really what tied it all together. Organisation.
And the chief exec at George House Trust, who's one of my most wonderful friends. He's one of the people that, as a chief exec, I lean on because he's a chief exec as well. Had been someone that Graham had worked with, and so we kind of understood. Again, go back to that real good old-fashioned guerrilla harm reduction stuff. Everybody, as you know, George, everybody has a thematic lead. And Dan's thematic lead was around sexual health and HIV, and so I kind of came to him and was like, Michael Atkins is doing this report, should we just do something? And that's where it started.
Where is it now?
Oh, that's a good question. It's come on in leaps and bounds over the last year. I mean, obviously the ONIT campaign was born from your brilliant report. So we've tried to mirror that, how it looks in terms of how the campaign looks. We launched the website on World AIDS Day 2023. We're in the process now of updating that, getting some new content. We took part in all the local prides last year, culminating in Manchester Pride. And we engaged, we reckon, around about 40 to 50,000 people in the campaign by attending all those Pride events, which translated into lots of visits to the website.
More visits to the website than any other thing that we've got.
But do you know what's, and I think that's, I think Dan should definitely say some stuff about this in a minute, but for me, where I sit with this, and congratulations aside in terms of it's been a success in terms of a project. The report that I was involved with is tiny. It's minuscule. You know, it was based on very few interviews. It was based on whatever we had the capacity to do at the time. What was glaringly obvious whilst I was doing it was how little we really know. Because it is a silence, because in many different ways, it is a statistical silence. It's a silence amongst people who are using. It's a silence in the wider community that is incredibly aware of it happening all of the time, because we want to be careful about saying too much about it because we don't want to misrepresent, certain communities involved. And it stays under the surface, and we've barely scratched it with that report. And so for me, whilst I feel proud of being involved in it, I remain on edge that there's so much more that needs to be done. So much more. And I'm all right staying there. I don't want to, until something is done more, I'm all right leaving that feeling like, oh, we should have done more. We need to do more.
Well, Dan, tell us what we're doing.
So we've got a really exciting year ahead, haven't we? Because the 4 pillars around ONIT is sex, chems, HIV and consent. And going into our 16th year is all around the year of consent. So we know that consent being that pillar of it is really crucial, especially in the chems world, because for people engaging within that scene, and I know for someone like me who engaged in it, pre-survivorship, post-survivorship, it's all around being in control, as well as kind of just getting lost in this world that goes around when sometimes you just kind of want to step off, and having that power to be able to say, I can say no, and you should hear me when I say no, really reflects it. We're aware that when you kind of are on, chems or substances, that there is that kind of area, I'm not going to say grey area, but I'm going to say that area of how can someone actually understand. Consent can be non-verbal. It can be around kind of looks, movement, touches, gesture. It's that narrative that we're trying to tap into that market to let's have this real adult conversation around boundaries. What do you want to achieve? And this whole thing about, we're not fussed if you are partaking in chems, but if something goes wrong, please come and reach out to us. It's okay. We understand. We know there are certain areas that people don't want to explore. And I'm kind of going to disagree with your kind of saying around your tiny little minuscule. From your report, you gave us that direction about how we create this website and how we create this target, the language, the non-clinical aspect. You know, it's a bit, we want to be able to speak more to chemsexers than to professionals. Because for us, it's authentic. Just like we are survivors, it's survivor-led. ONIT is led by people within that scene who have got experience within that scene.
And I think that's really important. I absolutely 100% agree with you. There's something about, I understand from your point of view, Michael, in terms of like, oh, it's just a little thing.
I just feel like, and like, this isn't like, trust me, guys, I have great self-esteem. I would put my glasses back on and just realised that. I felt so much self-esteem, I put my glasses back on. But, you know, I have so much, I feel great about having done it. I think it's important to stay in the not enough camp.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. But I think there's something, so, like with everything that Dan was just saying there, I think we also wholly agree it's not enough. And so beginning to reach out, and it does bring me back to access. Like, what are we doing as an organisation to make it easier for a wide range of people to access our services? Not just have we got a ramp so if someone's in a wheelchair they can get through the door, which we have. There's also the other kind of stuff that goes with it. And so Michael and I started out with this project, this Blue Room project, and so over the next year, we're going to revitalise it. We're going to, and we've already started. So I'm sure you'll talk about it in a moment, but in the magazine that we have now, in the last edition, which was December? Yes. We did a podcast special. And in it, Ethan, who is a adult content creator, I went on his podcast, and Ethan and some of his colleagues, some of the other people that he works with in the adult and porn entertainment industry, we're beginning to talk to them and kind of say, hey, like, how do we help you to kind of stay safe? How can you help us speak to your audiences? It's about that kind of that reach, that how do we get the best possible access for people? And I think ONIT is for me, it's a real, like, clear model. The way that we work with ONIT, or the way that we think about ONIT, is exactly the way we think about Mandem. We've got these two really strong allies, family members, these really strong things that are there that are helping populations step into our types of support.
It feels like it's a gentle guide in from two angles. One, it puts it out there, so it's a conversation that exists on a public space. So everyone can look at this, everyone can see, okay, this is a thing that people are now starting to talk about. But more importantly, you've got that sort of, it's kind of like that talk to Frank mentality where it's like, if this is just received by professional organizations, people who are too afraid to talk to them will never, ever get that information.
I was going to say, but you know, the thing about Frank is he gives very, very basic and quite moralistic advice. And what if you have spoken to Frank out there,
haven't called him recently.
It's very one-sided.
True.
And it doesn't acknowledge the many reasons why people take drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there's something about messy conversations
Yeah.
that I see so often. People in the public eye, services, people are really scared to get involved in a messy conversation in a place where you kind of go, oh, do you know what, there's some good stuff about that and there's some fucking bad stuff about that as well. And I think we need to start being willing to enter arenas where the conversation gets messy, where the situation gets messy. And I think it goes back to the kind of outreach work that you're incredibly experienced.
Yeah, and also, like, goes back to the safe room. The safe room is full of messy conversations. It is a room that is safe to have messy conversations.
And you have to get involved with those if you're going to have any chance of working something out. And I think a lot of the time around chemsex, people don't want to talk about it because, you know, I have friends who are engaged in chemsex. I have friends who tell me that they're safe. I have friends that they do it. And they get awkward when I want to talk around chemsex because I am not going to talk to them in a simple way where it's either all good or all bad.
Sure.
You have to be willing to have a conversation that acknowledges these things in order to reduce harm.
Otherwise, you stay on the sort of rails of that kind of British train track of shame where it is, well, this organisation deals with this topic, so let's not criticise it.
Yeah.
It exists and that's what it's doing, and this one does that too. If you can actually sit down and say, actually, you know, that service is not good enough for us.
Sure. And then if you then think about, like, what like you and Dan and Trung and the others do in terms of the community development team, and something as simple, and I genuinely mean this, as simple as a drop-in.
Yeah.
That's the foot in the door. That's the access point to being able to really feel like you can just test the water before the conversations get messy.
I think there's something special about being there at the very start of that conversation, seeing what foot people put forward first, that what they wear that first time they come in, how they sit in the waiting room. Are they there crocheting? Are they there, 10 minutes early? I think one of the great privileges of working here is not only getting to meet amazing men, but getting to meet amazing men and people who aren't men as well, of course, who are in the really interesting point in their lives. And they are there at their most vulnerable in this transitional space. And when you open that door to them, you get to see a little bit of their real self, a little bit about their fabricated self or their complicated self, like we were talking about earlier. And then that honest conversation kind of comes from there.
Can I throw it out there, but I feel like you might have something to contribute on this. But, like, what do we feel is such a challenge for men to show themselves in the lights that the organisations like We Are Survivors are encouraging men to show themselves in?
Yeah, we see it week in, week out. Obviously, what Mandem Meetup is doing is trying to create safer spaces. And when we have conversations, messy conversations with men, it gives them the opportunity to feel safe. And I think the big thing is trust.
Yeah.
Men don't trust what's gonna happen with the things that they're gonna say. They don't trust the people in the room because of lived experience. They don't feel safe, secure enough to be vulnerable because they're worried about their emotions, their insecurities being weaponized against them and being used in a way that, is gonna take from their experience completely. They're not going to be listened to properly, which is a big thing that we've discovered. Men really have a voice and they want to share and they want to talk about what's going on. But society has not created an opportunity for them to feel safe enough in the room to be able to do it.
And so we have to create spaces. So the project that Mandem and We Are Survivors do about survivor allies is about so Jamie and the organisation and me and the organisation kind of looking at going, right, okay, well, we can create spaces, but where are the other spaces that men go to on a daily basis? And kind of to be clear, when I'm saying men, I'm talking about all men in exactly the same way as so would Jay be talking about all men. And so when we then think, well, actually, a barber's, a tattooist, the GP, a dentist, etc., etc., then we think, how do we support those professions to help people who are survivors, who might have trauma, military veterans? Because quite frankly, post-traumatic stress is post-traumatic stress, and the ways of supporting people to work through that are pretty much the same. It does matter, but in the same sense, it doesn't matter where the trauma came from.
No.
The trauma's there.
And of course, you're much more likely to develop PTSD through military service if you've already got those adverse childhood experiences.
Absolutely.
5% of our clients last year, I believe, were involved in the armed forces in some way.
Yeah.
There's that strong correlation there. But if you can come into a space that is male but not sanitized in a sort of traditional way, it's not super clean and boundaried, even more outside of a GP's office. I like the barber because I think there's a place where a conversation is going to be had, and having that place feel safe is really important too. And it's also the challenge as well when we've created a space for men primarily, when we've got trans men who should fall under that umbrella and feel comfortable, but also people who are gender non-conforming but would feel comfortable in a male space. When they come into that environment, how do we at the same time show a space that has to break down all of the challenges and misconceptions by believing that most survivors and most people we work with would be non-heterosexual? How do we show that this is a space that is both accepting but also there to not just cater to one group? There's so many challenges. I think the drop-in is the greatest example because it is that most vulnerable moment. You've got so many spinning plates. You've got a lot of people who have not been able to learn to trust or have trusted and been hurt because of it.
But that's why I think, like I go back to Dan and you and Trung, like the drop-in, it really is that first step for so many people. And you must see it all the time.
Yeah, and I think what you said about kind of the messiness is, especially for people that kind of walk through that door, I think maybe as an organisation, at least in the past, we've been a bit scared about being viewed as messy and gearing towards kind of this sanitized view of kind of like what access looks like. But I think something quite important, at least for me as a service user, previous service user, is that going through that situation, going into that mess, and knowing that I've learned something from it, I've picked something up from it, and you can also then come out from that and learn from it. And I think there's just a big benefit from that, where I think maybe in the past we've been a bit scared of it.
I think there's something that winds into these conversations. I just kind of I don't want to get too hung up on the idea of messiness because messiness in itself is a quite messy concept. But it is though, right? It is. Yeah. And I think there's something there about how people want things certain and clean.
Yeah.
People want things to be one thing or the other. People want to have a sure and specific answer about something. The truth is that life is just messy. Sometimes men are bold and strong, and sometimes men are vulnerable, right? You can't define a man by one particular quality.
Yeah.
Because actually life is messy. Our emotions are messy. And men are just as entitled. And so when I'm thinking about messiness then, obviously we can think about messiness in terms of harm reduction and safety and the fact that we may need to talk more to people using drugs in order to make their lives easier and in order to make death happen less. But also there is something fundamentally messy, I think, a lot of the time for many men about acknowledging that they feel both strong and also sometimes devastatingly vulnerable. Yeah. That's messy for a man to deal with because it gets in the way of the sense of pride and how they see themselves being,
And that's why, the vulnerability bit is why I think Survivor Ally is just on point. I personally really struggle with the dentist, because of how vulnerable I feel in the dentist chair, someone looking over the top of me, etc., etc. And so, I think it's one of those things that for women and girls has in health, it's really been thought about. So gynae. Obs and Gynae, they've really thought about that, thankfully. Gaynor and I used to work with a woman who was a nurse, well, she was a midwife, and there wasn't a single woman in Greater Manchester that was heroin user or on methadone who was pregnant that she didn't know about, because we put the extra steps in. But we'd never really done that with men. And then when we started talking about this, it just made sense, didn't it?
100%.
And I think particularly as well, because Jamie and a lot of the lads from Mandem are kind of, have been involved with fitness and sport, and like that started playing in some way about when we think about some of the lads in prison, for instance, a vulnerability for them is often masked with how heavy can you lift, how many reps can you do, and I suppose for me, spending time with Jay and some of the lads, but particularly with Jay, and talking through some of those kind of our maleness and our femininity and our masculinity has really helped me understand that so much better, seeing Jamie and the Mandem lads.
I think there's something so beautiful as well about having a symbol like Survivor Ally. So that's up on a wall in a space where you might be feeling vulnerable. And it gives you a permission to have that vulnerability not have to be explored or questioned. But you can feel vulnerable in that space and just know that someone else has done the work for you. So you don't have to open up. It can maybe start a conversation, and I'm lucky to say that, there are organizations, so there's piercing shops in Manchester, good ones that have referred clients directly to us. And that's beautiful. But they don't have to have that conversation. They can just look at that and say, okay, I'm a bit safer now. And that's it. And that vulnerability can come back into that sense of comfort, and they can be there for the reasons why they're there in the first place. You've mentioned prison, you've talked about OUTSpoken, you've talked about that sort of barrier of vulnerability, about why men perform certain things, the kind of armor they might wear with them when they're in the gym and things like that. Before we look now at what it is to sort of, in this new year of consent and exploring that, about what it is to see underneath someone's armor in that most vulnerable moment and what it might mean for the organization, to look at consent and really explore the depths of that vulnerability and that connection, I would like to hear from two of our therapists who currently work as part of the OUTSpoken team in prisons across the Northwest.
Hello, my name is Ash and I'm the service manager for OUTSpoken and We Are Survivors. I joined the company in October 2021 as a senior trauma-informed therapist, and then I moved into the role of service manager. I've seen some big changes over the years of service. Mainly for me, the changes have been in being able to deliver a higher standard of service to the men. So we've looked at how we deliver service, what we deliver. I'm really excited for the 16th year and our year of consent. The thing I'm most looking forward to is working with a range of different people and services and being able to spread awareness of consent. Happy 16th birthday to We Are Survivors.
Hi, my name is Monica and I work as a trauma therapist in HMP Havering in Cumbria. I originally started working for Survivors about 3.5 years ago when I was seconded from a different organisation. But I loved it that much that I just had to become an official employee, which happened about 1.5 years ago. I think the biggest change that I've seen in the time that I've worked with Survivors is the growth in the organisation. It's become more dynamic and more responsive to the environment that we live in, which I think is really good. And a lot more people work for the organisation now, which is really exciting because I love working with all the different people. In terms of the next year, I'm looking forward to sharing the message of consent. It feels really scary that a lot of young people don't really know what consent is. And I think we need to share that far and wide. So I'm looking forward to hearing the different insights from the different places, the different parts of the organisation. And I can't wait to be a part of that. And finally, I just want to wish Survivors a great big happy birthday. Here's to many more. It's a fabulous organisation to work for.
Bless.
Monica,
So sweet.
every time I speak to Monica, honestly, she just makes me do a smile from ear to ear.
Same.
She's always so enthusiastic, and people don't realise she is so funny.
Yeah, she
is so funny. She's got this real natural comedy timing. It's lovely hearing them talk about that because the OUTSpoken service, so we have talking therapy services in all 15 prisons across the Northwest, came out of stuff that I was talking about earlier. It came out of Jimmy Savile. So at the time when everything was in the newspapers and on TV about Savile and what was going on in Rochdale with accusations around Cyril Smith and all that kind of stuff, we were getting knocks on the door about, can you come and help us, I suppose, contain the outpouring, the tsunami that so many lads were experiencing. And I developed a model. And we started in, originally, started in HMP Manchester. Then we went to Risley, Preston, HMP Buckley Hall.
These are the deep end, man.
Yeah. Tiny little bit in Forest Bank, tiny little bit at the time. And then it really went off in HMP Buckley Hall because it was a Rochdale prison, with everything in the news about Rochdale and people just being triggered and real traumatised. We started off in 1 day a week. That then grew to 3 days a week because demand just rose. And then we started just as a pandemic was starting. When everybody was locking down and closing up, we were growing. And so we opened 15 new services in the prisons across the Northwest. And I have to say, the team have been phenomenal, but we had some exceptional help from our Mandem meet-up friends, our brothers, who, came in. There was 3 of you originally, weren't there?
That's right, yeah, there was 3 of us who come in. The services were doing so well that there was just a waiting list that was like madness.
Yeah.
When we got in there into some of them prisons and we're seeing like hundreds of names on the list, we was like, we were in for a long haul here.
Yeah.
And so that was our job, to manage the wait list, to make sure that the lads that were waiting knew that they weren't forgotten about.
Yeah.
And so we set about those waiting lists.
And did it like exceptionally well as well, because it was a tough environment, COVID, post-COVID, and it's also a tough environment on them wings, isn't it, Jay?
Yeah, but there's nothing like it. It's hard to explain, especially when you go on there and then you start to see familiar faces and you create in a connection with these men as they start to trust in you and they see your face every week you come on and they're like, oh, yes, Jay, what's going on? Or usually what I get, yo, Mandem, from across the wing, and I'm like, yo, who's this now? So it was nice, at the same time to create those and give a safe space to these lads, because what we were finding was that when we was talking to them, they didn't feel like they had anyone in the prison who they could go to. Yeah. So even like mental health in the prison, they wouldn't tell them stuff that was going on because they didn't feel safe, because it goes on their record and everybody in the prison system can see that. And so again, it can be weaponized against them, especially in that environment. So when I sat down, I was like, look at me, I'm in a tracksuit, same as you. Yeah. I'm not a part of this system. I'm completely separate. Anything you tell me doesn't go on your record. You could just see like the weight of the pain that they were holding just release and be like, right now I don't have to hide. Now I can actually speak to this guy because he looks like me, he sounds like me. Yeah. And he's not going to go and tell the black and whites what's been going on inside my head or what's been going on in my life. And I think that's where the real power was. That's where the real connection was.
And it feels like so important to me as the chief exec to have a couple of like really trusted organisations that are part of the family. And, I always talk personally about people have a biological family, and then they have a logical family. And the logical family is the family that makes sense.
Sure.
And Mandem is part of our logical family, without a shadow of a doubt. And just having that, as Jamie was saying, like James and Luke going out on the wings and just talking to men who can go, God, you look like me, you sound like me, like you're just saying. I think it gives people a little bit more courage, for want of a better phrase, for then when they are released to carry on with that healing. We talk about healing's not a destination; it's a journey to continue with that healing, and then come into our community services. And because there's a little bit of there's already a friendly face. Some of the people already know Jamie, and they already know some of the Mandem lads. They know that brand of Mandem, and Mandem's got a really strong brand, and so it feels like it's not a massive hop, skip, and a jump.
The ice is already broken.
Yeah, to kind of go to Mandem Talking Circle, or go climbing, or the gym, or one of the walks, or the hikes, and that feels like we're able to give like extra support, but really trusted support in the community. And our community support is so important.
We try and take a little bit of the Mandem on board as well. I mean, it's the importance of someone being heard before they're heard. So even before someone starts speaking to you, they're going to look and see, is this even going to land? There's a reason why we're not sitting around community wearing sort of white gloves with our clipboards, saying, "All right, where did they bite you?" It's immediately it's a case of.
That was a fabulous accent.
I got a few more in my top pocket. My fabulous accents do come out sometimes. If someone comes in and they're hamming their own accent, I'll throw my Australian one in a little bit further because it's so classless. It's so unexpected in Manchester. Mostly they just want to know why I'm here, but they trust me enough to just open up.
I think we're all beginning to wonder whether you're really Australian. This could be a traitor's moment waiting to happen.
We just pull off my fake dangly hair.
Do you know what really, really, what I find so amazing about survivors, and so I've also done a little bit of stuff in prison as well, and that for me was like kind of an absurd experience, right? Because and although I have done other work in prisons, but I went there as Cheddar, right? I didn't. It wasn't in drag, but people knew that I was coming. It was a drag queen coming to talk to them about Pride, and it was fascinating because we had a conversation about shame, about masculinity, about all of that sort of stuff, and this weird bridge that happens between people who are so radically different, and it's that same recognition thing again. It's that same empathy. And there was a word that you used that I kind of want to pull around a little bit when you started to talk about the word in prisons, because you said they called us in to contain it. And it's the second time that you've used the word contain. And I've gone, I don't like that word, because you're not containing it, you're transforming it. You're transforming that energy. And the thing that it seems like you're transforming that energy into is some kind of ability to connect. It's a bridge of empathy, which is foundational to trust. It's foundational to actually achieving change. And I think that's always the remarkable thing about survivors. You have all these different people from different backgrounds, different political beliefs, men of all different varieties who will have different perspectives on what it is to be a man, managing to, through something that quite often was a terrible thing, an awful thing that happened to them, being able to transform that into something that brings them closer into brotherhood.
Yeah. And I think that it like the contain thing I use on purpose, because it's a container. It's not an oppression. It's a vessel.
Find something for it, a place for it.
Yeah.
A place for this.
And that how do you journey? How do you go through the gate from this space to that space, from prison to the community? And it's got to be transformative. It's got to be transitional. There's got to be a beautiful continuity to it. Because the moment someone's on their journey, and particularly lads that broke their silence in prison, of which there are lads who broke their silence in prison who then became, when they got out, they then became our expert reference group members. Yep. And they've told us about how important that moment was. And to know that even though I'm not in prison anymore, when I go to that drop-in or that safe room or I see that therapist, is it going to be the same? Because when I was in prison, I knew that. I was used to it. It felt secure. Well, I'm just going to go into a completely different space. It's going to upset the apple cart again. And I think there's something about, and I'll keep coming back to this, and I've said it to the team, community services, and particularly the community development team, they were always a little bit of an add-on, or that's how it felt. Because traditionally, we always talked about therapy, or we always talked about ISVA, and these two very clear.
There's a process.
These two services that effectively most survivor organisations do. Yeah. And actually, the messiness in a container is what CDT do.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said there as well about that client's journey and seeing it in a really interesting way. Trung, as far as I'm aware, you've never been to prison. I don't think they ever connected you to the meth lab incident a few years back.
Though they did try.
I mean, there's some fingerprints we still need to run, but more importantly, you've had your own journey, of course, as a client, but now looking at your role in the community, and then you get to see that journey into therapy, that new container, one moving to another, how it can bounce back and forth. You get to see a whole client's journey. I think there's something really, really special about that.
It's very humbling, very, I don't think I could have imagined being sat in this room. Sometimes I walk upstairs, I'm like, I don't know how I got here. But
I think we all feel like that about ourselves, honestly. We all think that. We all think, who's
about
that?
You. We all think that about.
But no, there is something just really special about just having that group there in whatever form that is. And I suppose kind of bringing it back to kind of access, something that I am very proud of kind of within the CDT and in the community is that there is something for everyone. Yeah. If there isn't something for everyone, then I feel like we're working towards it.
Yeah.
And something that you said, Duncan, is accessibility isn't simply getting through the door. It's how do we allow someone to get the best out of this service? And that's more than just a ramp.
Yeah.
That's more than just having a translator.
Yeah.
It's everything. It's how we approach it.
Yeah.
Isn't there I think that's such a testament, I'll go into the microphone, I think that's such a testament to a service, right? First of all, that the service users, the clients, the lads in our case, would want to be part of it, but also that the organisation is actively driving to empower them in order to be in that position. Because you go in so many services, and I trained as a social worker when I was 21, and I've seen so many different organisations, and the culture of us and them that can exist.
Yeah, and we are so far away from that ethos, aren't we? Them and us.
Yeah. And it's an unwillingness to see each other in one another, right? And I think that's what's so unique about a survivor-led service as well, because a lot of the staff can see the journey that a client's on. Because if you don't have that, the service becomes something that ends up keeping people down and keeping them in their position of being vulnerable and needing us.
And I think that unwillingness by some people to see some people has been so visceral with our outspoken clients.
Yeah.
Because I will always say this, and any of the outspoken clients that I work with as a therapist in prison will tell you this. I'm never going to excuse your behaviour. You are in prison for a reason, because you broke a law, you did something terrible. You changed someone's life. You took away someone's life. And these are very, very real things. It's not about excusing people's behaviour. It's about finding reasons for people's behaviour. But there's a group of people in prison that nobody wants to really often think about.
Yep.
And that is those who have caused us harm, those who have committed sexual offences. And in some way, the moment I went stepping into prison to be a therapist and to start the service, I was faced with this reality of, hold on a minute, as a survivor, as a therapist, how am I going to work with them? The wrong uns, the bad uns, and it took every challenge of my brain cell to really get underneath that. Yeah. And Gaynor and I had so many conversations about this when we were doing outreach and we were doing the Change Project. And I know when I leaned into Jay and Mandem and kind of said, can you come and help us with this? That there was those conversations about, you do realise that there's going to be people who have committed sexual offences. And we think about research shows us that despite the fact we have this myth, the vampire myth that we talk about, if you've been abused, you'll go on to become an abuser. The research absolutely, completely discredits that. We know that round about 3% of victims will ever move forward to offend against somebody else. And actually, what we've got now, the most up-to-date data, is just over 50% of people who commit sexual offences are under the age of 16. Yeah. That is just a shocking statistic. What is happening? How are we dealing with the peer-on-peer stuff? Because I struggle. I'll tell you now, as a survivor, I struggle with recognising that in young people, those that hurt people. And we've got to really kind of get underneath that. And so in prison, it's, in inverted commas, easy because it's contained. But then one of the prison lads, challenged me and said, why would you be helping this population? And I was kind of like, it's really important because prevention and blah, blah, blah. And even though I was saying it, I don't think I believed it. And Michael, who we all lost 2 years ago now in a terrible road accident. Michael was somebody who broke his silence. I'm not breaking his confidentiality. He was very open about this. He was in prison for a number of different things, particularly around violence and drugs. And Michael was the last person on earth that I would ever have thought would have any empathy, sympathy for somebody who commits sexual offences. But I remember him taking me to one side, and he was jacked. He was like a motorbike rider. He was like a scouser. And I remember him just putting his arm around me and saying, do you know what, Duncan? Do you know what I think about? If the people that caused me and you harm had been dealt with, we wouldn't have been harmed in the first place. And it was like a light bulb moment. And so from that point on, my question has been, okay, what are we doing about it? Because I can't unsee that now. I can't unsee the people that I wanted to not see. And it's not even been a hard sell to talk to people about that. It started off with the board, and we
had such a long discussion. And when you were talking about setting up the service, I remember the moment we were trying to figure out how many people we need, and we had to do the math and everything. I think it took us a bit
it took us a long time.
A long time. But hearing Monica speak, and sometimes like going back and, we had that piece of paper, I remember, on a table trying to figure out how many people we'll need and what kind of people and how we're going to find them. And now listening to Monica that says, she's doing it and she's enjoying it, and listening to all of you sort of like, talking about how you love working here is just like, for me, it's just like, I don't know, it's just such a special moment, because sometimes when you like plan all these things and sort of like you never really hear from the people that are doing it. But, Survive is such a special organization because you all do like such a, important work, such difficult work, but, people love doing it. And it's so important that we keep that, isn't it? Because, there's no reason why people doing, working in this kind of environment shouldn't really love doing it, because otherwise you shouldn't be doing it, really.
Absolutely.
And, hearing Monica and all of you say that, I think it's just so important.
And, the last group of people, the people that cause the harm, those 3% of survivors who offend, they're the people that you would think is the hardest group of people to find the staff to work with. And actually, we haven't had major problems at all. In fact, I think listening to survivors themselves, our expert reference group members, they just are like, well, yeah, it completely makes sense. Why wouldn't we want to stop future children being abused? And it's just...
it clicks.
It clicks.
It's prevention. It's everything we've been told to care about and worry about.
And, we have this brand new service.
Yep.
We are listening, which is part of a bigger service. So the bigger service is dealing with people who have committed offences, who are now in the community. And we play a decent part, but our population are survivors who have offended. And as soon as that kind of came up, and Gaynor and I had done some work on that previously, and we sort of talked a little bit about it, I just knew that there was a member of staff in the team already that I just trusted to deal with it. And now, thankfully, NJ has picked up this service, or the model, or even the idea. I'm sure NJ would say, Dunk, it's not an idea, it was just a couple of scribbles on a bit of paper that you gave me. And we're developing this brand new service, which is, I think, to your word, transformative.
Let's hear from NJ right away.
Hi, I'm NJ, and I'm one of the service managers and trauma-informed therapists at We Are Survivors. My journey over the last 4 years has taken me from being a therapist in the community, but also being a therapist in our OUTSpoken project in the prison estate. Currently, I'm working and developing on a project alongside probation in collaboration with another local charity. The project involves a holistic approach to supporting those who have been convicted of a sexual offence, but also are a survivor of sexual abuse. What I'm looking forward to most in the year of consent is about raising awareness, providing a platform and opportunity to educate on what consent truly means. It'll help dispel one of the myths and misunderstandings about consent, such as the idea that silence or non-resistance is and implies consent. Finally, I'd like to wish We Are Survivors a huge birthday as we go into our 16th year. Happy birthday.
Why has NJ nicked Chris's beard?
I know. Why have you? It's what's surprising is I thought this was going to be a difficult conversation to have with peers.
Yeah.
And I have been gobsmacked. So I was at a conference with you,
me and Trung, actually,
and Trung and Dunk. We do have two Duncans here, and we all went into what was called the dual status. Because did you go to that?
I didn't know.
Okay, so
you missed a treat.
So we were there definitely because I kept looking at you and you looking at me, and I was like, So first of all, I hate that phrase dual status.
Yep.
I really do. Like we're going to ban it. We're not talking about dual status. We're talking about survivors who have committed offences. There's no dual status about it.
It's like an award.
Exactly. Yeah. But I was so surprised at how many organisations were saying, "Oh yeah, well we have a service," but it's like nobody talks about it.
Everyone's embarrassed.
And I was a bit like,
silence.
does nobody see the irony of this? We spend our time trying to break the silence, and yet no one's talking about it. So I have to say this, not just because he's in the room, but I've only got the courage to do that because the board are right behind me.
Yeah.
The board are absolutely supporting me with going, no, you go and do what you need to do. And the second bit to that is I can only do it because I've got a team who are on board, who believe it as much as I do, and also our brother organisation who believes it just as much as we do. And, you know, we talk about the year of consent, and there's lots of things going to be happening, but one of the things that we, our survivors and Mandem, are going to be doing is that we're going to start a new project called OUTSpoken. It's a Through the Gate project.
Perfect.
Not just for survivors, not necessarily just for survivors who have committed offences, but for anybody, because there's a small population of prisoners who access our Outspoken service who are not survivors, but they're people who have experienced trauma in different ways. It's about us being, and they're often our allies.
Yeah.
They're often the people who will stand up for survivors. And so the Outspoken project, which I'm really excited about,
It's quality. And it kind of grew out of what we were delivering alongside the Outspoken team anyway. We started to notice that there was an accessibility issue where the lads who were finishing their sentence had just nothing else, especially the lads who weren't on license. They were just like, right, you're off now, that's it, through the gate, see you later. And so we started to be like, well, why can't we help them transition from custody to community? So we were then linking up with the guys on the wing and being like, so when you're out, okay, do you need a lift when you're stepping through the gate? And they were like, what? Like, they couldn't believe that was a thing. It's like, yeah, I'll come pick you up and then I'll take you to your probation so that there's nothing in between, you don't get lost on the way like a lot of men do between the gate and probation. And then it's like, right, let's go down to your AP, will drop you off there, or wherever your accommodation is, we'll take you there. And then tonight we've got outreach in the city centre. Come and help us give out clothes to people. And you know, we got footy on Saturday. And come to footy on Saturday.
Yeah.
So then we had one lad, he come to footy on Saturday, and he went back to his AP, told the AP about it, all the lads in the AP, and then 9 lads come like the next Saturday to come play footy with us. And it's like, yo, that's what it's about. Removing the barriers, letting these lads know that you've got a place. Like, just because you've been in prison doesn't mean nothing to us. You're just another man, and we're here to give you that community, that support, that brotherhood, so that you can turn your life around and be the man that you want to be.
Can you tell why I just completely fell in love with Mandem as soon as I heard him speak? Because there's such a synergy with what we're doing. And, you know, I always thought about the Venn diagram being like this little group in the middle, but actually the bit in the middle is full. It's full of survivor allies who are men, who literally could be in both services. And, you know, the survivor ally project, the formal one, we're doing some more input, so there's going to be some PT, so that's the next bit, which will be as part of our year of consent. The Outspoken, because there's lots of O's in that. I don't know why. I think it's my false teeth. I just find it hard to speak. That's going to be part of our year of consent as 2 kind of big projects on it, as we've been talking about. there's 3 things that we've talked about already which are going to feature very heavily in our year of consent.
You just wanted to call it outside outspoken just so you could hear Graham say it in his accent.
Say it.
Outside outspoken.
There we go.
Feels like he wants to go, there's been a murder. Who was that? Taggart.
Yeah.
Taggart.
There's a body in the Clyde.
Did you think that A, you'd get to 16, and B, this is what 16 would look like?
So, personally, I didn't think I'd live past 30.
I knew it was going to be a double question for you.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoke to you about that before. Did I think the organisation would get to 16? No. But that's not because I didn't think we could, but that's because it was, like I said, it was just this, like, explosion because of the Savile stuff that I don't think I was able to look past a year.
Was
day to day
breaking
the silence with a whisper, but in
Yeah.
fact, you never do anything
Smashing
with a
the
whisper.
sound barrier. And did I? Yeah. Did I think it would look like this? No. But I think that's something to do with me. I think that's something to do with, like, in my brain, when...
Do you think it was going to be bigger? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I don't... I have these moments. My much better half always says, you're like Forrest Gump, you. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you know that scene where Forrest Gump is at, like, all of those big major events? That's you. And I'm like, no, it's not. And he starts, you start a charity and then literally the biggest explosion, pre-Me Too, starts.
Yeah.
You get a phone call that you are needed at the launch event of the victim strategy at number 10 Downing Street, which just so happens to be the day before the Prime Minister resigns. So I came out of Downing Street, all these cameras are flashing, I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? And it's because they're waiting for Theresa May to resign. And so that was, like, kind of going on there. And then the biggest rape case in British legal history, you know, Reynard Sonaga.
On our doorstep.
Yeah.
Because where else?
Completely.
Yeah.
The first drama to show a male rape story pre-Watershed, Hollyoaks.
Mm-hmm.
Our fabulous other ambassador, James Sutton. James and I did a piece of work on Hollyoaks and EastEnders, Coronation Street, etc., etc. Rich and Baby Reindeer, you know, it's all just completely mental. What does 16 look like? Honestly, I'll be fucked if I know. But what I absolutely do know is that it will be exceptional. It will be transformative because there is a phenomenal group of people who are called employees who work in this organisation who, and 48% of them are survivors, out survivors, not out survivors. Nobody has to say. They can keep it to themselves. It's entirely up to them. But I've never met a group of people who give a shit as much as this group of people do about the people they work with. And that's not just frontline staff. It's not just people who meet survivors. The team that Jamie runs in the back office people, the admin people, honest to God, you literally, I have conversations with them on a daily basis. They care so much that a piece of information is wrong because the information is a real person. It's phenomenal. The care and attention that Graham took to create this brand, the way that the messaging that Theo takes a message and turns it into something that goes out on social media for millions of people to see. everybody just really gives a shit about this organisation. I've never experienced this before. And then our family members, so whether it's Mandem or Great Manchester 8 Crisis, the way that the family members, our brothers and our sisters, not only care about our organisation, but literally would stand up. They've got our back just as much as we got their back. It's fucking bonkers. It blows my mind.
I don't know who inspires me more, if it's the people on the staff who are out as survivors, or if it's the people who aren't men, are our survivor allies, not necessarily survivors themselves, and they're still here.
Yeah.
And they've been fighting for everything.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. But how could you not be inspired by the people we get to meet? I get to meet the most amazing men every single day. I get paid for it. I get to sit and have the most interesting conversations with people who've lived deeply fascinating lives, difficult lives. And it's such a privilege to get to know them, let them get to know me. I'm sure it's a privilege for them too. But
absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's really special. Duncan, one more thing. If you really were Forrest Gump, Christos wouldn't have had to do all those charity runs by himself.
Don't be getting him.
I did all that for nothing. He could have done it himself.
Don't give him ideas. I am not running or jumping out of a plane. Let me just be clear.
As we are coming towards the end of our 16th birthday party, the party clown did not arrive. There was a dispute between him and the baker. He didn't want to go in the cake, and because this is our year of consent, we respected that choice. So neither arrived. The bread and wine still didn't show up, so we're one short from college shows, but we'll order again later. Let's round out with, firstly, a message that I wanted to read out from one of our members of our community. This was a comment left on the second episode of this podcast, and it's by someone with perhaps the most inappropriate username in the world. Not inappropriate for the watershed, but because the username is unimportant nobody 8364. And I'll try not to cry directly into the microphone. I would like to add to the point of feeling ready to seek help, and I can only speak from my own experience. You may never feel ready to talk or seek help about/for such things. I know I didn't when I walked through Survivor's doors. My decision to seek help was purely based on this is my last chance before I give up. But going to the drop-in and trying out the safe room was the best thing I ever did. I would echo the point made here. The most powerful thing I experienced on my journey and experience of survivors was hearing other people's stories. And because while I knew intellectually I wasn't the only person to experience such things, for the first time in my life, through safe room and drop-in, I suddenly didn't feel alone anymore. So again, you may not feel ready, but from my own experience and through the experiences of so many wonderful people I met along the way, I feel I can say, you are strong enough to face it. For me, what was once the whole picture of my life is now just a part of my life.
Oh my God. That's phenomenal.
Yep.
That's incredible. I hope that person knows that. Tell me the name again.
It was unimportant nobody. It was 8364.
To a very important somebody, 8364. I am so delighted and so moved by your words, but I'm so delighted that you step through the door and keep stepping. I say that to all of my fellow survivors. And, you said just a moment ago about people who are allies that are not survivors. We talk so much about tackling violence against women and girls, and that's so important, and we're here for that.
Yeah.
We are survivors, Mandem. We stand against what is often male violence committed against women and girls. We will always stand against that. But there are some incredible women in this organisation that you would expect stereotypically and wrongly to be fighting for women and girls only. And they don't.
No, we certainly don't.
the gainers of this world, the Monicas of this world, the Ashes of this world, we have the most incredible women in this organisation who really see you're not going to tackle violence against women and girls if you don't tackle men and boys too. The whole picture. And I think that we are very unique as an organisation in that respect, that we get to work with those women too.
Yeah.
And also, we also get to work with trans and non-binary people in our organisation. And I am so privileged and so honoured that we get to do that, because this is a male survivor organisation. Men come in all shapes and sizes. Men look all very different ways. Men come to us from all backgrounds and cultural communities. And if somebody feels like their version of a man, then who the fuck am I to tell them that they're not? Because I'll tell you now, as a survivor, there's so many times I didn't feel like a man. I didn't feel like a human being. And so we're not going to turn anybody away. For the trans women that hear our stories, we're here for you if you believe that this is a space that you would want to come and get support from. I've never wanted to give trans women a space just because nobody else will. But we're here for the people who can't find anywhere else or are choosing to find our space. And that's really important. And I consistently get trolled and et cetera for that. I'm not asked. I genuinely, for anyone listening, I couldn't give a flying fuck. If you want to shout and tell me where I'm going wrong, etc., knock yourself out, sweetheart. There's something that feels so important that what we recognise is survivors, all survivors, we didn't do anything wrong. And so I'm not going to be someone who closes the door. My amazing team are not people who close the door. And quite honestly, even if I tried to close the door, there's no way they'd fucking have it.
Not a chance.
No way. And so let me just finish with something that we talked about, our year of consent. You started out by talking about 16.
Yeah.
And 16 is the age of consent. My boy that I gave birth to has grown up to be this 16-year-old, and he has the most amazing family that all of the people around this table and upstairs and in our other units, they're all part of his parentage. They've nurtured him. And I want to make sure that this next year is full of conversations, difficult conversations, funny conversations. I don't want to give too much away, but Mandem and We Are Survivors not only doing the Outspoken, but we have a film that we want to be making. We've got the money for it, and so we're going to start moving. We also are going to be reviving a couple of theatrical productions, which is exciting. We are currently in conversations about how does our art group and our creative writing group, how do they, or how do we support them to create something? I want an exhibition. And along with all of that, we're going to have in the last week of January 2026, we haven't booked it, we've not sorted anything out, but we are going to have a festival of consent, of which we're going to spend a week with events, conferences, lectures, research, art, music, club nights. We're going to have an ONIT club night because that's what Daniel and Graham said we're going to do, so I just have to go with them.
Brilliant.
We're going to do so much. We're going to make sure that whilst we're an organisation, we're now the largest organisation in the UK supporting boys and men, but whilst we're a Greater Manchester-based organisation, we are going to make sure that if you're in Greater Manchester, you fully understand consent.
And this is a call to action. This is an opportunity for you to get involved directly. You can find us on all good and not so good social media. That's Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can see what implication I'm making there. You can find us at @ThisIsSurvivors. The hashtag is #BreakTheSilence. If you have art, if you have a story, if you have something you wish to share around consent, there is a place for that. Please use those channels. Beyond that, of course, our doors are open to you in the community. Come and join us at a drop-in. If you're under the age of 35 but over the age of 18, come and join us at the Hangout instead. It's entirely up to you. Bring in what you bring best, your story, and share it with us. Beyond that as well, if you'd be interested in donating, this organisation can only continue because of the donations and the hard work that people pour into it. We have a Just Giving page. You can find a link to donations on our website. Only give if you are able to. We expect nothing from the men and wonderful people that we support. Finally, I'd like to say goodbye to my guests who have been absolutely wonderful today. If any of you wish to share a few words to the survivors or the allies or just anyone who's listening right now about what you think they most need to hear, that one sort of message to that survivor who's maybe ready to talk but doesn't know it yet, feel free to share them now. But
I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to shut up.
Okay, go on.
Our vision is no male survivor left behind. I'm talking to you all. We ain't going to leave anybody behind.
Your brothers, we say come as you are, you're welcome here. Because we believe that when you replace I with we, even illness becomes wellness.
And to my fellow survivors, you call us when you're ready. Someone will always answer the phone and listen. You put down that phone on us and you call us again, we'll keep picking up. And when you're ready to push that door open, a warm welcome and a big smile will be had.
One of the strongest and bravest men I've ever met is now a member of the ERG, and he told me that it took him 9 times walking up to our door before he was strong enough, felt ready enough to open it. So just, keep staring at the door. It'll open when you're ready. Thank you so much for joining us for this very, very special episode, celebrating our 16th birthday in style. Now, like all 16-year-olds, I'm sure we have a horrible hangout to plan afterwards, which will involve many unwise decisions and apparently legally driving a moped of a certain speed. So from all of us at We Are Survivors and our wider community, our board, our trustees, our ambassadors, and those who have made it all happen, and most importantly, the clients who are part of our family also, we wish you all a very, very happy birthday.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special episode of Beyond the Silence. We hope you've enjoyed your time here. Remember, if you do need help and you want to get in contact, the best place to go is our website, wearesurvivors.org. But you can also get in contact with us via our support email, that is support@wearesurvivors.org.uk. Beyond that, you can find us on all good social media websites at @ThisIsSurvivors. And if you felt inspired by this episode to share your own story or artwork or just want to see what others have already shared, you can always search out the hashtag #BreakTheSilence and find us from there. From our safe space to yours, thank you.